There's a story that started to pick up some momentum over the weekend. Jordan Addison, who's the All-American from Pitt, the wide receiver, won the Biletnikoff Award this past season. Apparently, he's considering transferring. Now, there was a May 1st deadline for him to make his decision, or else he'd have to get a waiver for this next season. But one of the teams that's out there that people are looking at, and there's been the word tampering being thrown around, is USC. And apparently, according to Pete Thamel of ESPN, Pat Narduzzi, the head coach at Pitt, he called Lincoln Riley at USC. They had some very poignant conversations. Ooh. Pat Narduzzi was not happy about some of the rumblings about this going on. But here we go again. This is another stud player at Pitt who's returning next season, but apparently there's a real chance he's not going to be returning to the Pitt Panthers. So.
Yeah, he's a Biletnikoff winner, right?
Yeah.
He was the best wide receiver in college football. So, really talented player. He'll be a first-round pick next year. You can see why any team, whether it's Pitt or Southern Cal, would want him. Here's the problem with college football, and I do think we're at an inflection point where if someone doesn't step in and do something, we're going to start to tarnish the sport and what it looks like. And here's the reality of what this sport has been pretty much throughout its existence. This sport has been built up for the fans. It really has been. It hasn't been for the players, because the players are now finally being able to capitalize off of their name, image, and likeness. And if you think about it, not that the NCAA makes a ton of money from college football, but all these conferences and universities do, and they've been able to profit off of essentially free labor. So that's what's gone on forever. And now we're moving closer to a model where you're going to see these players become employees of these universities, and that's for another conversation for another day. But NIL is not what has created what's happening right now in college football. If you think that's the case, you're dead wrong. It's not. It's the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And it's how we're allowing these kids or young men to be able to get out of any commitment whatsoever. I mean, it is as simple as saying this. Let's provide a 1-month window where these young men have the opportunity to transfer if they want, if they so choose. And they get one freebie at it just like now. Instead, you've got this year-long ability for any kid at any point to jump onto a roster and go, I don't like it here. Or someone calls up, let's just say a coach from another team or a player from another team, calls up and says, hey, we'd love to have you here. And then they can sell you on, we'll have this NIL deal for you here. Okay, great. But even if that NIL deal was there, if you shut off the ability of the student athlete to just up and leave at any point in time during the season or throughout the year, he's got to at least commit for a year until that next window opens up. So there's actually some sort of sense of commitment by that player, at least for that year. And so right now, this inflection point has gotten to where we're looking at a college-level game of football that's really being orchestrated like a professional league. However, we don't have the safeguards. We don't have a union. We don't have this structure where there's a little bit more black and white instead of just all this gray area. And so this is just one example of many. Look, if Southern Cal was tampering, they're not the first. That's the truth. Other schools have been doing this since the transfer portal was put in place. Okay, that's been there. That's been there for a while now. It's the reality of now people are doing it, or teams are doing it, and they're using NIL money, which is above board, to do it. Now the only problem with that is that's considered inducement, and there's no one right now cracking down on any sort of quote-unquote inducement, whether it's Jordan Addison with Southern Cal potentially, and what proof there is of that, and who's overseeing it, who's the governing body that's going to step in and say something or do something, or the young kid in Southern California that's a quarterback who gets quote-unquote an $8 million deal, some of which he's already been paid, and you're saying, well, how is that not inducement to make sure he goes to that university? Well, just because they put whatever they put in the contract? I mean, that's the problem with this, is there's really no governance over any of this, and so it feels like the Wild Wild West, and that's how things are operating right now.
I just think it's there's so many moving parts, clearly. I mean, everybody has made, well, not everybody, but people have made the argument that, coaches have been able to leverage the college system to do just that. Use it like a transfer portal, like an NIL. Like, I'm going to go to the college. Look at what Lincoln Riley just did. Look at what USC is doing with how they're approaching, the whole Lincoln Riley hiring. So it's for me, it's just so many more that it kind of raises the stakes in terms of how you view it and how things are being done. But one of the things that I'm seeing with all these kids, because I deal with a lot of these kids on a daily basis, it's further perpetuating the feeling of entitlement, of really, in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases, they're delusional. College athletes are a little bit delusional in the sense that what their opportunities are and what can come of it. For all the big stories that we see with the Addisons and the Caleb Williams and the Rattlers, there are a whole bunch of other names that enter the transfer portal and are sitting at home right now on their couch, going to a junior college because no one picked them up. See, we're not hearing about the horror stories yet. We haven't seen anybody become, addicted to painkillers or anything, and it's being attributed to them just sitting at home, not getting another opportunity. There's a very, very dark side and another side to this whole transfer portal type of deal. While I will agree and say that the NIL is not the direct problem to all of this, because it does give them the opportunity to be able to create monetary monetization of their brands, I will say that having this whole transfer portal and being able to leverage the NIL to get the kids you want into the transfer portal is quickly and far and wide becoming the issue that's going to have to be looked at and addressed in some way, somehow, at some point, possibly monitored and regulated, because there's no slowing this freight train down at this point in time.
And that's the hard part is I don't know anyone in Congress who wants to run on this platform. I mean, you've got a stock market that's taken on the worst month we've seen since 2008, back in the housing market crash. And there's a lot of people out there who are watching inflation and just trying to pay for, simple, goods out there, fill up their gas tank, put food on the table. There's so many other issues in this country right now. You got a war in Ukraine that people are constantly monitoring to see, is Russia using, chemical weapons? Does that provide a path where all of a sudden the U.S. has to get more involved because of that? I mean, there's all sorts of issues out there right now that I think if you ask Congress members, they'd say they're more important than talking about, college football and how it relates to the federal laws or state laws, state by state. So I don't think Congress is going to come in and save them. I think it's going to collectively take the Power 5 conferences and really those conference commissioners and other leaders within the college football community to come together and say, come on, let's figure out a common ground, or let's figure out at least, let's split up divisions where we've got a model where we've got players who are employees, who are being compensated for their play. And let's start to put together that model. And we can have other universities that say, we don't really foresee that being something that's attractive to us. We'd rather keep them a student first and student athletes, and we're going to go this route. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think we're honestly headed there, probably next year or two, and that'll help with sorting out some of this. But there's no hero coming in. There's no Superman coming in to save the day. That's the problem. And I think every school is trying to abide by what they believe the rules are, but that's a different interpretation depending on where you are. And if you're a desperate blue blood, and I think you know who I'm talking about, you'll do anything to make it work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'll do anything for perception to make it look, whether it's saying that there was more people at your spring game than there actually were, or calling up some of the best players around the country and utilizing NIL money to induce them to come to your school. There's tampering, whatever you want to call it. When you're desperate, when you're a desperate blue blood, like Southern Cal is, like you'll push whatever envelope you can. and try to make it look like it's above board, because at this point there's so much gray area, it's hard to tell.
They're poking some fun at some earlier quotes this offseason from Lincoln Riley, where he said, quote, "I think at some point we'll have to put in some guardrails, some ways to ensure when this can happen, when this can't happen, so that players, staff, all that are a little bit more on the same page." But in the meantime, let me go ahead and just play by the rules that we got going on now, and I'll try and grab the Biletnikoff winner and add him to the roster.
Well, if you think about it, you can wait for another program to develop a kid and then just go outbid them for a kid.
Okay,
I mean, that's kind of where kind of recruiting. So now you're not recruiting high school anymore.
Doesn't that seem
you're recruiting
off?
College.
Doesn't that seem wrong?
Well,
it does
but that's
seem
the problem, because the portal allows them to do that.
God.
If you forget about the money. The money's always been there.
Yeah.
There have been kids being paid by schools coming out of high school. I remember hearing on one of my stops, someone's like, "Well, we tried to recruit that kid, but we didn't offer him as much as another school was able to." And I'm sitting there going, "What? Offer? What do you mean?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, the going rate for a high school 5-star quarterback." I'm going, "Okay." I mean, the NIL stuff has brought on its own issues, and a lot of that's not the kids. It's not the kids, folks. Like, it's all the adults in the room who continually try to take advantage of what they see as an opportunity. And so it's guys who are agents or acting as agents of high school kids who are being recruited. It's those people. Sometimes, in all honesty, it's the moms and dads out there. I mean, they're just as much to blame, for some of this with the way they've acted. It's all of it. But the reason why this is able to take place is because these kids can up and leave. They can literally up and leave. And so unless they do something about the transfer portal, it's going to continue to be an issue for a while.